To Weekly Open. Sorry, I started the show over Don's talking. It's great to have you. I'm here with Greta and Don as usual, and it's great to have you with us. We're Doom posting pre-show, so probably goes to say what we're gonna talk about here this next hour. Cred, you're on the left. How you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing well. I just can't stop thinking about all the ways to deliver value to my Friendtech shareholders, which is a joke. I'm not doing that at all. But it seems like it's dominating the discourse. The market nuked. Everyone's like, fuck, okay. And then this very welcome distraction comes around. And now, yeah, that's the name of the game. How are you?
I'm doing well. Don, how about yourself?
I'm doing good. I cannot believe you cut me off like that.
No, I'm sorry. Well, we all said we have a hard stop at the top of the hour. So.
Yes.
It was a scintillating tale about scintillating. Is that a real word? Maybe I made it up. But about construction and people building stuff. So
scintillating, like a PG version of titillating.
I don't know. I'm gonna have to Google it to see. I sometimes make up words. Scintillating. No, it looks real.
Okay.
Sparkling or shining brightly. Brilliantly and excitingly clever or skillful. No, it's fine. It's fine.
Dude, if you don't know it, we will not know it.
It's fine. Yeah, so Ledger's got the most bullish chart up, out of everything that's floating around markets at the moment. Yields up only.
I mean, I wish this was a Bitcoin chart.
Oh my God. Yeah. That top kind of looks like the 20K top. So this would be... if we travel back in time or something, would look quite different. But yeah, none of that in our world. Only shares are going up, Ledger.
You mean the 20K top, like...
Yeah, before we then broke it in 21.
Yeah, before we broke out.
Yeah, that's what it looks like.
So that left-hand side would be, this is 2017,
yes,
and this is correct. 2020. So
a simpler time.
So 15% 30-year yield we go.
Oh, shit. I mean, that's all in worth you have to take.
That's just on the daily. I mean, it looks incredible on literally every time frame, and maybe best of all on the monthly, just because it's such a long-term trend shift. It's crazy. Yeah, I think this is a big risk to the economy and to our bags.
The second one being much more important. Yeah, it's in order of importance.
Yeah, we might as well get our macro LARPing out of the way. But the dollar made a massive recovery as well. Kind of did this swoop-de-loop thing down here, and we'll see if it can make a higher high. But it recovered from that breakdown from 101, with very little difficulty. And then what else was I? Oh, I was going to show you the daily on this one as well. I think I started the show somewhere around here, and Cred commented on my moving averages, which is very rare. The very rare Cred moving average compliment, which must mean it just supported your natural bias. But yeah,
no comment.
All of those are pretty natural headwinds for us and perhaps the broader market as well. But I just can't get my eyes off of these yield charts. So anyway, that's what I'm looking at. And then if we switch over to Don here, we see how just gorgeous the Bitcoin chart is.
Yeah, beautiful. This just looks like complete garbage to me. We talked about it last week, right? And I was like, this is not that great. This week it's even less great, I would say. And then, I mean, I don't even know what to say about this one other than we broke 30K right to the downside, and I don't really have a support until 20K, and I'm probably not gonna do much until 20K. That said, after a flush like this, I usually get more bullish than I was before the flush. But right now, like we talked about with the macro lapping, I'm actually just not too excited to be in markets, as in the S&P, for example. I could see that pull back further. I would expect that would lead to further downside on Bitcoin as well. And then you're kind of in a shitty position, right? So given my macro kind of mindset right now, I'm just not too interested in trading this on the long side of things. Also not interested in shorting it. I'm just chilling, taking some time off basically, and I want to see this go to 20 or to back to 30K. I think that's where it starts getting reasonable to trade this thing again, because what we had basically was endless sideways into a straight up like complete rug pull. Went almost like on BitMEX, it went below the ETF announcement, like the ETF news, BlackRock ETF, whatever, blah blah blah. So we've retraced all of that, even though we haven't even had a decision yet, right? So if we get a negative decision, I think we're going to go just much lower. If we get a delay, we're going to go lower in general. And if we get an ETF approval, I think we're just going to go up. So we're in this situation where we just have to wait and see. Like the TA is bad. This chart looks bad. This looks like it wants to go down. But as long as we don't have the ETF decision, it could still go either way just based on that. I think that's kind of what I'm watching anyway. I don't care too much about support resistances unless it like super giga nukes. Just the ETF news. So like if I see it when I'm sitting on the computer, I'm gonna take advantage of it. If not, I'm just gonna wait and see how that plays out and then make decisions afterwards. So yeah, that's kind of my view on it. It's pretty straightforward.
Yeah, I think it makes sense. And I'm completely baffled about the ETF stuff. But one more thing on the whole rates component. Yesterday, I asked Twitter if they knew what this was, and then Kobe dunked on me massively and called it a chart. But this is a 210 yield spread. So it's just one other element to look at. So this is when you hear people talk about the yield curve inverting. That's the red shaded columns. The historical dates of those yield inversions, as everybody's going to know, are pretty well aligned with recessionary environments. But what I find interesting about this is just how big the inversion is right now. And I wonder if one of the things that we may see is what you would call a kind of a squishing of that spread, where perhaps the 30-year, that chart that we showed, catches up a little bit to the 2-year, even if rates are going higher at the same time, which is indicative of a little more normalization of those higher rates. So anyway, something I just like watching this chart. So on the ETF side of things, Cred, how do you even think about this from a trades setup or whatever?
You know what? I didn't think Don's idea is particularly bad, as far as we don't have the decision and the market's still thin, especially after a move like this. If you want to just take a catalyst-based news punt when it comes out, I think that's pretty reasonable. Obviously, Don, being triple vaxxed, wouldn't understand what's actually going on, which is that BlackRock is manipulating Bitcoin lower ahead of the approval of the ETF. But it's fine. We can have that meta conversation another time. But yeah, look, half jokes aside, the technicals look pretty shit. You're not going to find any allies there in the short term or even in the medium term. So you essentially need either a catalyst trade to get you back in, or for this thing to just go lower and to become more discounted. That's really all there is to it. I didn't see any other super compelling arguments. I quite like the red box. If it gets above that would start to look reasonable. But I think that sort of implicitly would require some positive ETF related news to get us there in the first place. In general, I think we discussed it on this show that historically periods of really low volatility have preceded like upside continuation, and that was like the prevailing bullish argument for some time during all the chop. They're like, oh look, when Bitcoin volatility was this low, historically this low, that has more times than not led to significant upside. Well, now the volatility is resolved, and it wasn't to the upside, it was to the downside. So if your argument was, once vol resolves, just let it go and let it play out and trend whatever, surely that applies to the downside as much as the upside, or at least it's a reasonable, worthwhile consideration. So that's kind of my model for this thing, which is essentially, catalyst, news trade, ETF stuff, if at desk. If not, wait pretty much. So I don't think 6K is a perfect analogy, but the basic reasoning I think still applies, that you get volatility constriction and then volatility expansion, and people who were so bored with the constriction step in front of the expansion too early and eat shit. So like when 6K broke, you had people buying 5.8, 5.5, 5.4, 5.2 just because 6K broke. And obviously price ended up making those people really uncomfortable, because if you're too early to that vol regime shift, you get carried out as well. So there's a chance that could be what we're seeing here. But yeah, it's a hideous, ugly, it's an absolutely hideous move. You might see some short-term reversion on that. But bigger picture, that you still have to consider the argument that vols have shifted and we might be entering a trending portion of the market. And thus far, it seems to be on the back of weakness, not strength. But again, the same proviso applies. I think the BlackRock ETF thing would be strong enough, at least in the short to medium term, to lift us out of it, especially if the books are very thin and dead. But those are your options. Either wait or let the ETF decision carry your next sort of short to medium term trade, really.
If I remember correctly, too, the first, 4 to 8 hour candles that broke down around 28K or so, open interest was increasing during that, where people were essentially buying the dip, assuming that range would maintain. And perhaps that helped feed into some of that flush.
Oh, it always does, right? So people still have their mean reversion goggles on and essentially end up averaging in and then getting wiped with one move. It's the whole pennies in front of a steamroller type of analogy, where, it sort of moves within the range, you bonk it, moves within the range, bonk, bonk, bonk. Eventually the range gets smaller, and once it expands, you're praying that you're not giving back all your P&L from that type of trading. And you don't really get much time to be wrong on moves like these either, which exaggerates the move that we see. Obviously, it wasn't as bad as Don's chart, because he's got the BitMEX chart, and that one is like outlier wick level, but the rest of them don't look particularly good either. So, yeah.
We got a good question that's not a Bitcoin related question, but it's one we haven't really addressed before, and I think it's probably has some underlying influence on what we're seeing in the market, this uncertainty that's going on at Binance. And the question from Victor is basically, is BNB teleporting to zero? I haven't paid a lot of attention to this chart. I don't know if y'all have. But if you look at it on a weekly basis, it had this teleportation to the upside from like 45 to 200 plus, 300 plus, topped at 700. Wow. But anyway, from 40 or so to 200, 210 is just this elevator up that it's always maintained. Do you think this is the type of thing where Binance is at risk enough for them to not be able to prop the coin, or for people who believe in Binance and BNB to not be able to hold this up, and we see the balloon deflate down to a significant degree, like sub 100 or something?
I mean, Don loves BNB. He's got strong views on this, I'm sure.
I mean, I'm just not a fan of the whole trade thesis of holding this thing. I think the downside risk is way too great. I don't think it's gonna go below 100. I'd be surprised. I could see this wash out towards like 120 or 140, because the support's been kind of getting tested too much, and Binance in general is under heavy scrutiny, right? I don't know, like right before we began the show, I saw someone say that they're having problems with their European banking partners again. Not sure if that's true. I just saw a comment and I couldn't look into it because we basically started the show right at that point. But yeah, I mean, I don't see the point of holding this now that basically all regulators are looking at crypto, because either it's they themselves say it's not really an exchange coin, right? So why hold it? Because at that point, like if you just want to hold some random coin, you can hold anything else, and it's not going to have any negative effect on you. I mean, you will still feel it, but less so if Binance has any troubles, right? As in, basically, you don't get the upside of this being an exchange coin if Binance does well. Just a little bit, maybe. But
aren't they still doing the whole like burning thing based on trade volumes, or
no? I don't think so.
Oh.
I could be wrong, but I don't think so.
They've been trying to decouple basically as much as they can. So basically holding something that will, if Binance goes to zero, it will go to zero as well. Very unlikely that happens, but that's the risk that you have. And then also if Binance gets in trouble, this will nuke as well, even though technically, I mean, it's not supposed to. And then if Binance does well, it might do okay, but it will probably not do as well as it did in the past, just based on the fact that it's been getting decoupled. So basically, you get a trade with a lot of risk and not that great upside. So like, I don't like it as a trade. But yeah, I'm not team Binance is gonna go to zero, but I'm also like, I'm not holding anything on Binance, and I'm staying way
well away
from that. Yeah, exactly. Thank you.
Because also, I don't see Twitter's not going to like it because it's not a 6-figure market cap.
Yeah, they cannot chill and they cannot pump it. So yeah. I legit think it's a terrible trade on the long side, and I think it's a pretty bad trade on the short side too. Just based on the fact that where you're gonna take that trade, and two, I mean, it's still Binance. It's still Binance, right? It's still CZ. He just needs to whip something up. Like if this drops like $20 and he comes out and he's just like has like a typical kind of idea of what he could do with BNB to pump it, you're at risk, right? So like this is one of the ones where I just think like, yeah, it doesn't make much sense.
I'm pretty sure the only thing he said all year is 4. Like,
yeah,
I don't know when that started, but it feels like it's been for 6 months or more.
Steady lads deploying more launch pads.
Maybe he's just very smart. Like he makes up these like memes, like the 4 and whatever, and he's just like, if I say 4, they cannot really get me because I'm just saying 4. Like I'm not actually claiming anything. So
I've already addressed this criticism. 4.
Yeah,
there will.
It makes me so bearish. It makes me so bearish on the whole thing, right? Like it basically treats customers as idiots. Like you cannot think for yourself. I'm not giving you any reason. Just trust me. And we're in crypto. Like that's the last thing anyone should be doing in crypto, right? You don't trust anyone or anything. And if someone is just like very outspokenly, hey, I know what I'm doing, trust me, then I trust them less. Like it's just like everyone that tells me like they don't know what the fuck they're doing, like that's the person I trust 10 times more than the person that is just like, okay, yeah, I have the plan, I know exactly. It's just not trustworthy in my eyes. But
obviously Coinbase is a big winner for especially your most regulated markets, but and North America in particular. But who do you think is the big winner globally from an exchange perspective? If like with the struggles that everybody's facing and seeing potential liquidity drain out of Binance, like who would stand to benefit?
Yeah, I mean,
I'm not sure. Maybe no one. Because
on-chain?
Yeah, I mean, you can make on-chain meme type arguments. I'm less sure about incumbents simply because of the market conditions. Like if there were a lot of volume sloshing around and a lot of new participation at the same time, then it's easier to carve out an argument for someone else being able to bootstrap success. But if liquidity is so shit and low and just sort of not good from a trading perspective or speculation, inflows, whatever, then existing participants are going to be more reluctant to move elsewhere because the liquidity there will be even worse. So I feel like you need a sort of bootstrapping effect where the market is just in a better state in terms of, again, volumes, inflows, etc. And then you could make the argument for someone else to pick up some of that slack and for participants to move elsewhere. But essentially, you end up at a point now where Binance, from a liquidity point of view, is still by far the sort of least bad option. So I think that sets up an obstacle for other exchanges as opposed to leaving a gap, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. What are we looking at here, Don? Tether on the right. What's on the left? I got
USDC, market cap of both. And I mean, it's been interesting, right? Like USDC's been bleeding market cap. Tether's kind of been holding okay. But we've seen in general, like the stablecoins just not doing too well either, right? Like there's been an outflow. Tether is doing Tether things, so that's always doing well for some reason. But yeah, USDC not doing so well. A bunch of other stablecoins not doing so well. Overall, money flowing out, right? So that kind of supports that whole there's not that much liquidity going around right now.
At the same time, the stablecoins are still making, like, the entities behind these stablecoins are making a lot of money because they don't need as many stables to make money, which is the same reason the liquidity is challenged in the first place, is people can take their money out and go earn 5% on
people like Donald. Yes.
Yeah. But any money that's left in Tether and USDC and whoever will happily do so as well. So there's a lot of demand for those dollars to earn yield. So
yeah. Ledger, let's talk about the thing.
What's the thing?
The thing. What is the thing?
I don't know. What is the thing?
Friendtech, whatever it's called. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because that's all that, that's the only game in town at the moment. Even a lot of these Telegram bot meme token stuff that we were getting shit on last week for not being balls deep long, they've sort of gone to the wayside a little bit in terms of attention. And now it's all about influencer shares and all sorts of other things. So
yeah, I think, we've seen, according to Banteg shared a GitHub of every user he could scrape, I guess. There's 101,000 or so people who've signed up for it, which is a lot in crypto. And there's been a lot of activity. The 10% tax is shared on each transaction is shared between the app and the user who's being traded. Each gets 5%. And I think the 24-hour fee for Friendtech hit like 1.2 million or something like that. So far, the big winners are definitely the people in the top 10 or 20 or whatever of trade volume, because they get a piece of that pie. Although for most of those people, it's probably not that big of a piece of their pie. So not as relevant. And then Friendtech itself has made a lot of money in fees, like millions and millions of dollars, enough to build for a long time. And so I think that's potentially what's most interesting to me. Is it doesn't matter so much, like, is the app perfect right now? But you've just essentially, through this fee structure, given a pretty clever team access to capital to go and do stuff now for quite some time, and perhaps create a sticky community-driven / social app. So I'm really curious to see what happens there. Right now, I imagine everybody here has already had an opportunity to sign up. If you just Twitter search like FT-, you'll probably find user codes that people are trying to share. But the things that I don't like is, I think that tax will feel more and more burdening over time as people stop making quick money with new people joining and that kind of thing. Because when someone joins right now, you can buy them for like 0.005 ETH or whatever. And then you just sell them for 0.03, which, like, anybody with, 10,000 followers is going to get to. And then, you've 6x'd or whatever your initial investment. So your 20% tax doesn't matter. What happens is, over time, like, getting in and out, a 10% tax each way creates the same problem that it created for something like art blocks. And I think you'll have some of this same type of slowdown of transactions and liquidity. But I think that they'll probably, what if I was them, I would open up to, how can you essentially subscribe to these users where they're getting paid in more ways than just the fees of people trading their value. So, like, essentially open up more of a subscription-like model where you can manage access and get paid more directly rather than indirectly, and other things. And if they take advantage of their moment, then I think that's the type of stuff they'll do. If they're more short-sighted, then I guess they'll just do the airdrop and dump it on people and and walk away and do the next thing. But I'm intrigued by it. I'm not writing it off by any means, even if I think some of the mechanics are flawed right now. What do y'all think? I talked for too long about it.
I think in general, like, this kind of stuff, right? I think at this point now, it's quite late in that kind of game.
You mean to go join and buy and sell people?
Yes, I mean, you can still probably, but basically how this stuff works is, if you get something, and this is quite easy for all of us to understand, right? Something like, okay, you're trading shares of people. So if you know, okay, Kobe is valued at 1 ETH, then you can kind of guess what other people should be valued at. And then you can just basically trade on that. So you have, like, inherent kind of knowledge about the market, even though it's a completely new one. And then if you're just early enough, and I saw a bunch of people basically be very smart about it. And this is basically like one way to multiply a tiny stack into quite a big one. Not necessarily like I'm not saying that you should be getting on there and doing it now, but in general, like when something new comes out and people start talking about it, like just putting like 0.1 ETH or even less than that on a platform like this, and then just being early using it can oftentimes be like one of way to kind of make it like make multipliers with a small portfolio, which is worthwhile if you're just starting out. Like this is the kind of stuff that I would be looking at back in 2017, early / late 17 even, where you have opportunities that bigger people cannot really take, right? Like it doesn't really make much sense to buy something for 0.1 ETH and then sell it for 0.3 if that's all the liquidity you can get. But it does make sense if that's significant to you, right? Like that 3x is significant to you. And that's quite cool. I think these kind of opportunities, they present themselves often enough that you have a chance to just kind of build something out of nothing. This is basically you put nothing in and you can make low amounts of ETH. And that's quite cool. So I would just basically tell people, like, if you see something like this, don't write it off immediately. Check it out. You don't even doesn't need much money involved. And for me, I've been kind of like just checking the platform out. I've just been buying people basically. I haven't sold a single thing on it. But if this was me from years ago, this is 100% what I would have done. Like just trade people around while the thing is new. If I was into coding, like I saw a bunch of people basically write bots. There was very obvious ways to make money on this thing. Basically just write bots that snipe new listings. And that took like a day or two where people were making like 5 figures, 6 figures just by buying people for nothing and then immediately selling them for like 0.1 to 0.5 ETH just when they signed up. This kind of stuff is the best way to make gains relatively risk-free and multiply a tiny stack into quite substantial ones. So
it's very similar to what happened with Uniswap, where I think the initial value of the Uniswap airdrop was like $4,000, and then quickly Uniswap did multiples as well. And this has the opportunity to do that too. If they do the airdrop, I'm sure there's going to be some kind of move on that underlying coin, and somebody can turn almost nothing. I think, Don, you said you initially moved like $20 onto Base to create your account. But into a lot of people have made a couple ETH or whatever on this thing. And then if you get the airdrop and then you do it a little bit more and, you end up with 5-10 ETH out of almost nothing, that's a huge leg up. And that's what your like classic gem hunters love. And it's good for the market too, or for the speculative component of the market rather. So and I'm not near as bearish on it as a lot of people are. I know Weiss did this like 1,000-word thing and then put his Rollbit link at the end of it. But I don't know. I think I'm perfectly happy to give them the benefit of the doubt. They obviously hit this kind of mimetic value of tapping into what people want. I'm hyper jealous of it, as like I run Flip, and I would love for people to have this kind of conversation about my app and product. It's a lot harder than you would think to get this type of attention. So I'm impressed by that. Craig, what do you think?
Yeah, so I think depends on how you basically frame this thing. If it's some version of a social media competitor, then you should be bearish inherently, because these things very rarely overtake the thing that they're trying to compete with. And most of them have a very relatively short-lived hype cycle of, initial traction, and, people are posting how much money they're making, usually the outlier bigger accounts that's not scalable. And then, people pile in, and when that hype cycle sort of runs out, that's it basically. So I think social media-esque competitors generally trend towards zero. And that's a very sort of good prior to have going into this. I also see just a ton of fucking cringe from a lot of larger influencer type accounts who are immediately promising all types of utility, which I would speculate, won't really survive the test of time, and is used as a sort of very short-term way to just pump the trading volume and share price so they can make a few ETH and then that's it. And, it's a pretty asymmetric bet, because if the platform does pick up traction and do something well, you benefit just from being early, and people won't hold you too much to your kind of early promises of utility, because, if it really picks up, then as long as they have shares and those go up and, there's a rising tide, then they'll be fine. So you get to make a risk-free promise, because if you're right and it works, your shareholders will be happy even if you renege on your promises. If you're wrong and it sort of dies out and goes to shit, well, it doesn't really cost you anything. You kind of just go back to Twitter and take your ETH and pretend it never happened. So that's not amazing. And some of these people just don't have any bloody alpha to post in the first place, and there's really no evidence to believe that they're suddenly going to start being, super active handholdy. And for a lot of people, it's just a cheap paid group alternative as well. So,
well, it's not even that, because all you're getting is a small percentage of what that person is paying. So
yes,
there's a value gap, and that's what I meant when I was talking about, like, I think there's things they need to do to connect the dots there between what the user thinks they're buying and then what the actual person they're buying it of.
I think that's fair.
Gets.
At the moment, though, it just seems like in a lot of cases, a very cynical pump and dump, in terms of, I'm just going to promise all this future utility, all my calls, this other shit, drive a bunch of volume, and then I really don't.
And I don't want people to get the wrong idea about what I'm saying I like. Like, that's not my point. I think that I wouldn't discount their potential to, now that they have some attention, to be able to do much more.
Sure.
And yeah, I mean, as flawed as it may be now, like, they barely could keep the thing alive. Like, once it actually finally started working, some of the interest went away.
Yeah, that's true. As soon as you can sell, that's
yeah.
So I don't know. Look, it's fun. I think it's cool to toy around with and stuff. I'd be super skeptical of people trying to go for aggressive brand building on the back of it, or making a ton of promises. You should be very skeptical towards that. I mean, you could treat it as a trader.
You mean individuals?
Yes, individuals. Yeah. I think you can definitely treat it like as a trade if it's appropriate. Like, okay, this guy just is addicted to shilling and he will do anything for a few ETH. And so I'm going to buy this early because he's going to promise shit, and people who are dumber than me are going to go in and buy it, and I can dump on them. That's not like an unreasonable proposition. But if you're here as in like, oh, well, this is just the new app where all the creators are going to be incentivized to share, I think we definitely need more evidence before that becomes clear.
For sure.
I agree with your other concerns about pricing and what that bonding curve looks like over time. And from an incentive alignment point of view, what happens after you've hit that initial sort of peak and you've made your few ETH, and maybe you've made promises, maybe you haven't, and then this sort of staleness period enters. And at the moment, you can't really share links, you can't do the chat functionality is terrible, you can't do any pictures, it sort of dilutes what you do on Twitter, and that part is definitely messy. I guess I'm a bit, listen, I may sound like ultra cynical, and in many cases I am, but I'm also like, I'd like for it to work, and it'd be cool if they did something nice, because it's even more cynical, I think, to always be that person arguing that crypto never builds anything for actual people. These are useless ghost protocols, etc. Yeah. So part of me just wants to inherently sort of cheerlead something that's built, from us for us, and give it a chance. But the hyper financialization, influencer ponzification cuts the half-lives of these things.
I think that makes sense. I just, on the other end of it, I would love to see a crypto native solution, so that we're not all just reliant from a community perspective, the way that you talk to your colleagues or friends or whatever. We're not like just beholden to Emperor Elon, like without as benevolent as he has been so far. Like, I would love to see, whether it's Friendtech or whether it's Farcaster or Lens or whatever, be able to make a dent and create like a meaningful kind of community platform that has a crypto component to it. These are the types of things that I think are good ideas to see expanded on. And what I like about Friendtech is it in my own friend groups, it's created an avenue to talking about, like, oh, this is interesting, what if you could do X, like, it's an ideas incubator, because it did create something relatively interesting and therefore has other people thinking. And I think that what comes next could be the type of thing that finally clicks from how do you get crypto people on crypto platforms from a community and social perspective. And so I'm really bullish on that potential.
You just want them all to go to Flip, don't you, Ledger? That's the real long con here.
I mean, we've for a long time tried to focus on community. We just haven't done like chat and stuff. So,
sure.
But yeah, I mean, I think that it gives my team at Flip, as an example, like plenty to think about in terms of how can we create more true connections versus like this is, speculating on whether cred's going to go from 0.2 to 0.7 ETH or whatever.
No, I had fun. I just reminded everyone that this is going to be fucking PvP and they should assume it's go to zero, and I'm not promising anything and won't do shit with it. And then, they nuked it, which they should, take profit and dump on me and fuck off, do whatever. I am worried that could these be securities? I haven't spoken to any of my lawyer friends.
They literally call them shares.
I mean, they're literally called shares. Some of the utility stuff is a sort of common enterprise. All the other branches of Howey, expectation of profit in many cases is quite direct and explicit through the efforts of others. Obviously, the share issuer. I don't know. It's not obviously clear.
I don't know if it's still there, but I think when it first launched, it had this link to privacy policy, and it's like coming soon.
It still might be that. Yes. Actually, I'm not sure if it's changed since then.
I think it's still that. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of things wrong with it. And I think there's a lot of ways to kind of misuse platforms like this. But yeah, I mean, the trader in me sees this as something that's quite cool. I like BitCloud too on the trader aspect. Like I never posted. I think I posted about it once on Twitter, and then I just traded a bunch. I traded Logan Paul. I traded all these influencers, and I turned like I don't know. Like I think I made like 50,000 on it with like I put like 1 or 2 ETH on it. And I was just having fun, right? And I like being able to have an avenue where I can do that. But generally, these kind of died down. BitCloud died down and went to zero. And this could very well too. But the whole idea of like trading like that, I don't know, it's just fun to me. So, yeah.
The one other thing that I like about this, and this is a little nerdier, but so we support this as well for Flip, but the iOS App Store, even the Android App Store, they really restrict you a lot, and they're troublesome. But you can turn most websites into what's called a progressive web app, or PWA, and that's actually how Friendtech works. Is in order to bypass this 30% tax that the iOS App Store creates, you just save it to your home screen on your phone, and it feels like an app, but it's not an app. It's a website with an app icon on your phone. And I think that's probably the future of how most crypto apps should be, because from firsthand experience, it's awful working with app stores. Not to mention working with like a whole different stack in terms of what you're developing. But you can't offer the same experiences with purchases and things like that. So I hope that this like kind of taught users how to do a progressive web app, and I think that would be really good for crypto.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of cool things to be made out of this can turn into like just nothing happening, and most likely, like more likely than not, that's how it's going to end up. But I don't know, like it's something different at least.
Yeah, it's a classic bear market game, right? Like,
yes. Oh yeah,
we've done this before.
It's just to distract us, Ledger, before the next brutal leg.
Oh no, don't say that.
We have someone in chat that's very upset at the whole idea of it. And I would like to say, like, to me, altcoins, like, it's pretty much the same deal, right? Some random guy throws up something and it doesn't lead to anything, bleeds out to zero. Like, at the end of the day, like, trading anything in crypto, it's just you trade it for the trading part of it, not for whatever the future utility, in my eyes anyway. Like, it's all going to zero anyway. So like, as long as I see something that seems good to trade, seems fun to trade, I like that idea. And if not, then not. pretty straightforward for me. But that obviously depends on your view on the whole altcoin space in general.
If you're not okay with this, but you are okay with Obama Inu Harry Potter coin or whatever, then that's a you thing, I think.
Yeah. Like I do like, I think there's like gray areas, and there's shades of gray in general, where some things are more obvious scams than others. But I think this is actually on the lesser side of things in comparison to a lot of the other ones that we've been seeing in the last few weeks to months. Because this has at least the potential to turn into something, whereas a lot of the other ones, right, like all the meme coins and a lot of the coins that are still around, right, they're not going to turn into anything. Like, I would even argue that Dogecoin is never going to turn into anything, and that's one of the biggest coins in the market. Same with Litecoin, same with a lot of the other coins, like
Shiba.
Yeah, that's all garbage, right?
And these are tens of billions of dollars that are plunked into them.
Yeah, it's very obvious too, right? Like anyone, like no one's trading them because they're like, oh, this is like the future. They're like, oh, this is a meme. People are gonna buy memes. I'm gonna make a bunch of money on it. So if you're kind of like, oh, this is beneath me, trading like that, fair enough, right? But then I think 99% of the space should be the same, right? Because it's very obvious that most of the stuff is just basically a way to enrich the founders or the people that are holding it.
I mean, I'm naturally drawn to the things that have significant utility in crypto, but that's not necessarily where the speculative value tends to be. Like I love DeFi stuff, and that doesn't mean that DeFi has been like a great place to trade, where you can point to inherent token utility or whatever else. That the market doesn't necessarily care about that. The market's just going to do what it does.
Yep.
Anything else in y'all's minds? Have we beat Friendtech to death?
I think so. Yeah, I don't think like that whole saga is gonna be quite funny, because it's most likely it's gonna go away, right? But I mean they are going to do an airdrop, as far as I understand, so it's gonna stick around for a little bit at least. It's gonna go away, and then we're gonna have, like, in 2 or 3 years, we're gonna have a bunch of people be like, hey, we told you so. But that's not really useful for like just a trading perspective, right? Like if you just want to trade a market, whether that market still exists in 5 years or not isn't really meaningful, as long as your trade horizon isn't like super long. So yeah, I don't know. We'll see how that turns out, but I don't think there's much more to say about it. And honestly, there's not that much more to say about the entire market in general. Like, it's just all pretty garbage right now.
Yeah, most of the rest of the alt market looks pretty much like Bitcoin, but maybe worse.
Yep. I mean, worse. Look at AVAX, for example. Like, oh, that's I should add
signal,
some.
bottom, signal, bottom, signal.
I should add some more. Look, like Don is flooding this again, bottom signal.
I like your alt season 2023 there.
Yeah.
The 1 week.
I mean, that was literally where people were like on Twitter, like, oh shit, alt season's back. Let's go, baby. And you can barely see the candle. Yeah, that's kind of how the market is right now. And when the market is like that, everyone's just looking for stuff to trade, right? Like stuff that is actually like for once not doing the same thing. And yeah.
Oh, one other thing, Base is clearly a winner in all of this. Like getting a lot of people bridged over. Typically, I think people are pretty lazy, so I wonder if they're just going to figure out, well, what else can I do on Base now that they've made their few ETH or whatever on Friendtech. So I wonder if that'll create some momentum for Base, and then potentially Coinbase itself. And I've seen people talking about like the opportunity for fee capture by Coinbase with their L2. So watching the L2 wars, and obviously, alternative layer ones like AVAX, EVM compatible ones or not, like, don't seem to be winners thus far.
No, I mean, that's a horrendous chart, and there's a lot of these.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of stuff is down 3% today, while Bitcoin is basically doing nothing, and that's been the story for quite a while. I mean, AVAX is down horrendously since the top, and not even since the top, just in the last few weeks.
Well, it's hard to think of a bullish narrative when I'm thinking of like who are the top holders, and the only people that come to my mind are like Suzu. And are they still holder? I don't know, but that's not great.
Nope.
All right, let's leave it there. I know we all have hard stops. Thanks everybody for being with us. Cred, you good?
Don't buy our shares.
Yeah, don't buy our shares.
Actually, don't.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right. Thanks for joining us. Appreciate everybody. We'll catch you next time. Hit like and subscribe and all that good stuff if you feel like it. And hopefully we see you next week. Bye-bye.